And welcome into the Tuesday edition of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5. The Game, Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Konezovic, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Hope everybody is doing well. Our Joe Rexrode is out today in Knoxville, Tennessee for Tennessee Volunteers Media Day. So Josh Heupel and company about to get things fired up. College football season will be here before we know it. Joe Rexrode, how we doing? What's going on? You're looking fly today on the streaming devices that we have. It's good stuff.
I'll take that. Yeah, I'm wearing the polo that I wear every third day that I shall wear to Tennessee Football Media Day. But, yeah, looking forward to, Josh Heupel and his players, and probably a much more extensive media day than what we got under his predecessor.
I would say that you're probably right about that. I will give Josh Heupel some credit. Before he ever even sets on the field for Tennessee, he looks to be better equipped in that area than his predecessor.
Yes, and some people think that's not a big deal, but I do. We can talk about that later too in the show. But yeah, it should be interesting. In fact, I have a little bit of a hint of what's going to come today, and quite a few people that Tennessee fans really would like to hear from, I think, are going to be available today.
Sounds good. We've got a lot to talk about on that front. We'll have Adam Sparks, who has made the transition to the Knoxville News-Sentinel to cover the Vols. He'll be coming up at 7 o'clock today here on the show as well. So looking forward to getting Adam Sparks and his viewpoint on Tennessee football as they head into their media days starting today. So we'll do that a little bit later in the show. Joe, we spent a lot of time yesterday talking about Carson Wentz and his injury that he sustained with his foot. We had Stephen Holder on from The Athletic, and the extent of the injury wasn't really known. Reports came and surfaced that he was going to try and not have surgery and wait it out and see if he could be available for week 1. And that shifted a little bit yesterday. Frank Reich and the Colts announcing that Carson Wentz is going to have surgery and that he can miss anywhere from 5 to 12 weeks. Now, let me start by saying that's a heck of a range, 5 to 12 weeks. Yeah. I'm not sure that I've ever heard a range quite like that before. That could be as soon as the start of the season where he's available, and that could also be like almost November when he's available at that point. That's a heck of a range.
Yeah, it's not easy to get Vrabel to laugh, right? But Vrabel actually laughed yesterday when someone threw that timeline at him. And he wasn't like laughing at Wentz's misfortune. Right. I don't think he was. But he was just like, wow, you got a great chance of being right, 5 to 12. So, the high end of that would mean that he would miss both Titans games.
Yeah.
So there's a scenario where he's fine for both and a scenario where he misses both. I mean, best case, you're talking about a bone being removed from his foot.
Yeah.
You're talking about completely missing camp. And you not having, and I think this was an important camp for him. I mean, it is for any quarterback, but especially I think a new one coming off a terrible year, new personnel, all that stuff, and just being thrown right in. Still not great when you look at especially the Colts' early schedule. I mean, the toughest part of their season is right away. So, not good for the Colts.
Not good for the Colts at all. And look, we talked yesterday about quarterbacks that they have on the roster. Maybe some quarterbacks that they could potentially target. And nobody knows exactly how long Carson Wentz is going to be out. But, Joe, if it shifts more to, the 12-week part of this, whether it's 9 or 10 or 11, whatever the case may be, they're in serious trouble. I mean, you could make an argument with him being, out for all of training camp and coming back the first part that he could struggle coming back in there. But if he's not in there and your options are either Sam Ehlinger or Jacob Eason or Brett Hundley or trading for whomever that's not Jimmy Garoppolo or Deshaun Watson, this Colts team could be in some pretty serious trouble. And if it moves towards the 12-week part of this timeline for Carson Wentz, the Titans could be sitting in some pretty good shape when it comes to the first part of this season because we talked about it yesterday. Nothing scares you if you're a Titans fan about Jacob Eason. Sam Ehlinger, I don't think is quite ready to be an NFL quarterback at this point. He may never be ready to be an NFL quarterback. If it's towards the 12-week part of this, I think the Colts are in big, big trouble.
Yeah, and then my question on this is, at what point, after surgery, do they get a maybe a little bit better feel for which it will be? I mean, to me, with Wentz's history, age, and all that, and what you're asking him to do, I got to think it's at least somewhere in the middle. And if that's the case, and you're talking about throwing him in after a few games of the season, to me, the Colts have to really consider going out and getting somebody. And I just retweeted right before the show, my coworker at The Athletic, Vic Tafur, who covers the Raiders, friend of the show,
Yep.
who said he said that, well, he said before he asked about a trade for Mariota, the Raiders would be okay with Peterman as their number 2, which is an interesting point. I would not have necessarily guessed that. He said they'd be okay with that, but they really like their QB room as is, would take at least a 3rd rounder to get them even interested in a trade. Is Chris Ballard willing to deal a 3rd or better for a stopgap right now?
That's a great question. And we know Chris Ballard, not a big fan of first-round picks, but those middle rounds certainly been able to work his magic on that front with the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I think if Carson Wentz misses significant time, that the Colts are in trouble. Not everybody feels that way. Colin Cowherd gave his thoughts on the Carson Wentz injury and the race in the AFC South between the Colts and the Titans, and still a lot of love for the Indianapolis Colts from Colin Cowherd. Here's what he had to say on his show regarding the Indianapolis Colts.
They got a smart GM and a smart head coach and the league's best offensive line, and it's virtually impossible to not get to the playoffs when you have the best offensive line or the second best maybe to the Browns in football. Carson Wentz, their quarterback, he is now elected to have surgery on a foot injury, reportedly a high school injury, and he is out somewhere between, 5 and 6 and 12 weeks, 1 month to 3. Now, they're in such a wobbly division, they still have a fighting chance to scratch and claw their way to a 9-8 record. That could win the division. Houston's a mess. Jacksonville rebuilding. I don't trust Tennessee. But this is an interesting story.
So what do you think of Cowherd floating it out there that maybe Indy can get to 9-8, and maybe a 9-8 record is good enough to win the AFC South?
Well, I don't spend a lot of time pondering his takes. He's got a lot. I mean, he's got some scorchers. Well, I mean, hey, listen, I don't begrudge anyone for saying they don't trust Tennessee.
Sure.
I mean, again, the one side of the ball is completely, reshaped, and who knows what it's going to be. I mean, I think I'd feel a certain level of trust. Had I watched any Tennessee Titans football recently, I'd feel a certain level of trust for the offense. The interesting thing I think that Cowherd says there is he talks about Indy's offensive line, one of the best in football. But of course they also have, a guy coming back from Achilles at left tackle.
Yes.
And I'm not sure. The interior of that line is tremendous. They've got some outstanding players. I think it's awfully close between the Titans and the Colts in terms of offensive line quality. You bring Taylor Lewan back at left tackle, the Titans are better, period, at the most important position. And, right tackle is certainly something to figure out for the Titans. So they both have a question, but I think it's awfully close. So it sounds to me like Cowherd has a little bit, maybe too much respect for the Colts up front and seems to be dismissing the Titans there. But again, it's probably someone who's watched about 19 minutes of Titans football in the last year.
Would probably be my guess. Maybe on the high side of the amount of Titans football that he's watched in the last couple of years. So with that in mind, you brought up Mariota, and we talked a little bit about that yesterday as well. To me, if I'm Chris Ballard, I think it makes sense at this point to make a trade for someone of that ilk anyway at this point. I mean, we talked about Jacob Eason. Apparently that's not going all that well. Sam Ehlinger as well. I know you just brought in Brett Hundley, but Brett Hundley is not a high-quality option to play NFL quarterback. To me, and Corey Curtis brought this up yesterday on the show, probably something you should have thought about anyway if you're Chris Ballard in the Colts. You've got an injury-prone quarterback coming in to be your starter. You need to address the backup spot with a guy that can at least come in and play, whether that's Mariota, whether it's making a trade for Gardner Minshew, whoever, somebody that's come in and has played significant snaps before in the NFL. So if you're Chris Ballard in the Colts, let's say it is a third rounder. Are you willing to pay that price at this point, even not knowing exactly how long Wentz is going to be out, to go and try and attract maybe a Marcus Mariota from the Raiders and get him in here so at least you have an option at quarterback that you feel better about rather than your current setup in your room? I say yes.
I think so. It's one of those things where you can look at the Colts and say, look, this is a classic example of a team where, just a game manager who doesn't screw it up, you can win a lot of games. It's really complicated because how are you winning early? How are you not getting into a huge hole if you don't have more than that at quarterback? And then the question is, who would actually come in and quickly be able to figure this out and give you a chance? I mean, there's like Jared yesterday at practice. We were talking about this, all the media at Titans practice. And he's like, well, it's going to be a Foles, or it's going to be someone in that family of the Chicago, Kansas City, Philly, Colts, that offense, which I get. But and Nick Foles has been asked about this already this week, but that's not doing it for you.
No,
I'm sorry. You tell me. I know that you're a Mariota hater. Would you rather have Mariota or Foles right now?
I'd rather have Mariota.
There we go. I mean, I think it's clear. Like there's at least some potential to make plays. I mean, Foles is just, he's a guy who should be holding a clipboard now, and he's not going to come into me and make some big difference. So the pickings are slim. I think those are the two guys that we debated yesterday that probably make the most sense. They give you at least some playmaking opportunity. But then, again, they're coming into that system. How quickly can they figure it out? Because they got to be ready to rock right away. So if you're Chris Ballard, are you giving up a high pick when there's far from any certainty that anyone you bring in is actually going to flip those games around and put them in your favor? I don't know.
Let's go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Jordan texting in, Carson Wentz's injury is not that serious. It all depends on where the incision is going to be. I would say at this point, they don't really know how serious. I mean, the 5 to 12 week timeline, that's quite the range. I mean,
yeah.
If it's 5 weeks, yeah, it's not really that big a deal. He'll be back on the field. 12 weeks is 3 months. That's a long time.
Yeah, it's just, and again, and he probably hates this, and I'm sure some Colts fans hate hearing this, but his history has to give you a little bit of pause, and you're like, it'll be fine, no problem. He'll get right past this, I mean, it's one thing after another. So, and again, even if it is best case scenario, is he going to be ready to play at the level they need him to play? They're a good team.
Yep.
But they are playing some of the best in the league, and in week 3, they're playing the Titans in a huge game. Is he going to be ready to play at that level? Is this not going to at least somewhat take away one of the big strengths of his game? I can't imagine it wouldn't. So you're going to hear optimism about this, because that's usually how it goes. But I can't imagine that this doesn't disrupt their first month in a negative way.
We're off and running today here on Robby and Rexrode. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. When we come back, we will get into the Titans, including, is it time for concern for a couple of prominent members of that Titans offense? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Don't miss the Music City Grand Preview Show with Chase McCabe later today at 6 p.m. Brought to you by Hiller Plumbing, Heating and Cooling, and Newton Motor Group. Also, this Saturday at 9 a.m., make sure you tune in for a special Grand Prix edition of Chasing Checkers with Chase McCabe, brought to you by Firestone, Spring Hill Heating and Cooling, Mercedes-Benz of Music City, and European if I could say this right, European Collision and Repair as well. Fourth time's a charm, Rexrode. Got that one finally.
You got it. I know what you're saying.
Reading's hard at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Reading's fundamental.
It is reading. Reading is fundamental. Welcome back in here on Robby and Rexrode, ESPN 102.5 The Game. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. The Titans back on the field yesterday for training camp. Joe Rexrode, you were there once again before you made your trek to Knoxville for Tennessee's Media Day coming up a little bit later today. Anything stand out to you yesterday for the Titans on the field? Obviously, Caleb Farley made his appearance on the field, activated off of NFI yesterday as well. What stood out yesterday in your mind at Titans training camp?
Yeah, well, I've got my little. It's not little. It's just big notebook here, which I actually stole from Katie. No,
That's impressive.
Katie let me take it. So it's actually been very helpful during camp. So I'm looking back at my notes. One of the first things when they got into team, and it was team red zone. We've talked about A.J. Brown tearing people up. Well, little out route that Tannehill stared him down, and Christian Fulton jumped it and picked it off. And it was great play by Fulton. It was a good play by Fulton. It was also kind of a gimme. And as I watched that play, I was like, is Tannehill trying to go around to the various DBs and give them all a pick so that they get a little confidence going, and then get to work? I mean, this was a very late and bad decision by Tannehill more than it was a good play by Fulton. Good for Fulton to be aggressive, because when you're dealing with a guy like A.J. Brown, that can freeze you. That can make you unaggressive. But he jumped it, and good for him. He also had another near pick. Then he had a pass break. All of Tannehill passes. So very good day for Christian Fulton. He stood out like he hasn't really stood out so far. And I think that was, I think it's important for him. I haven't seen a lot of bad from him, so far. But, him making some plays is a good thing. I mean, Vrabel, said this too after yesterday's sessions. Confidence, it's an important thing. Now, Tannehill also hit Julio Jones at Fulton's expense on a very pretty touchdown. Then, of course, Tannehill put a dime on Julio. Now, this is a later session, by the way. They do team, then they go do stuff, then they come back and do team. They come back and forth to it, and then go with their position groups, But Tannehill put a dime on him, and Julio dropped it and came up, ginger and on the sideline and kind of crouched over. And, at first someone was like, maybe that's just you just dropped a TD kind of injury, but he stayed crouched over and then went inside. And I can't imagine it's anything serious. Obviously, you hope it's not something like a hammy, because we know that a hammy was a problem for him. But it looked like probably a little ankle twist would be my guess right now, my official non-doctor Rexrode guess. So we'll see. I'd imagine that he probably won't be out there today, and so people will probably freak to some extent. But it's hard for me to imagine that little thing with no contact was anything serious. Tannehill, he was sailing some throws again. He had some great throws. He had some sailed throws, and then he had, the bad decision. He's had a few. So, people can interpret that as they will, I suppose.
Well, and to that point, that's something we talked about a little bit yesterday, and Tannehill with some more picks yesterday as well after we got done with our show as training camp practice was going on. And Jared Stillman asked Mike Vrabel about that and about how concerned he is at this point with the interceptions that are taking place thus far in training camp. Here's what Titans head coach Mike Vrabel had to say yesterday after practice.
Not asking for a percentage, but just your feel for how much of that is good play versus bad decision. And I know a couple practices ago you were unhappy with the practice because you felt like you were giving away a lot of opportunities out there.
Well, certainly with the quarterback center exchange, I think the interceptions, there were times today that I felt like we made a really nice play, and then I felt like, maybe on the pressure, like we got to throw that ball away. We're just, it's like they blitzed us, and that ball's probably just got to be, dirted or thrown away, and I think that's probably, when you throw out there late, that's a recipe for disaster.
So that was Vrabel yesterday on the interceptions and talking about sometimes it's just a better play to dirt the ball or to throw it away and to get out of there when pressure is coming your way. Look, interceptions have not been a big problem for Ryan Tannehill ever since he took over as quarterback for the Titans. And one of the things that fascinates me about football, maybe more than all the other sports, is we make a big deal about what goes on in practice, especially a big deal about what goes on in training camp practice, whereas other sports, like I've watched thousands of hockey practices. I can promise you I've never made one big deal out of anything that's happened in hockey practice. Now, it's different in football. I recognize that. But it's not like interceptions have been this huge issue for Ryan Tannehill. So I wouldn't say that I'm at this point concerned that all of a sudden he's just going to start turning the ball over left and right once the actual season begins. But I do think something you've brought up is interesting. Like, is it just a training camp thing where you're trying to see what you have in your receiver group and maybe you're willing to take some more chances? Is it just maybe to give the defense a little confidence? I don't know. Tannehill's a pretty competitive guy. I doubt he's out there just turning the ball over on purpose. But I don't think that I've reached the point with this with Tannehill where I would be all that concerned about it yet if I'm a Titans fan.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, I think that, that question was a good question by Jared. Take note. Positive comment from me.
You did,
Jared. And you can kind of tell in that answer. I promise you, the Fulton pick of Tannehill, that is throwing late recipe for disaster. What Vrabel's talking about.
Yeah.
Now again, there was another one that he threw late in the later period that could have been picked, probably should have been picked. And I can promise you, Ryan Tannehill was not like, hey, all right, DB, good play. He was not happy. So it's competitive out there, and he wants to, be great, be perfect as he's taking these reps. But it's a great point by you. There's no other sport where usually you don't even watch any practice, right? And as this season extends, there won't be a lot of practice watching, but
right.
Training camp in the NFL is just one of those special things where, and traditionally it is with fans, and it would be this year if not for the construction over there, or it's kind of a way to get ready, obviously, and sort of to get a feel for the fishbowl you're in playing this sport. And it is amazing how much we make of some of these things because Tannehill right now can absolutely let it rip. And he may not be happy, but he's going to take chances right now that he's not going to take in an actual game because he knows how disastrous it can be to turn it over. And like you said, he hasn't had that problem in games. So I'd say if you're a Titans fan, if you had a choice, you should prefer that some of these DBs that you hope give you a better defense, make some plays, get some confidence, and you should feel pretty decent about your quarterback.
We'll continue to take your thoughts on the Titans on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. A big day upcoming today for the Titans in training camp. The pads are coming on. What position battle is the most interesting with the pads on today? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game.
Well, it's, I think, where we start to evaluate some of these guys that, up front, especially. There's a lot of guys on both sides of the line of scrimmage, offensive and defensive lines. Monty Rice needs to take some blocks on and needs some contact. These tight ends, so those are guys that, really you're focusing on. What can the runners run, behind their pad, take care of the football, and hopefully we've been able to do that, carrying it. I wouldn't say throwing it very well, but we've been able to take care of it running it, and so hopefully we can do that again tomorrow.
That was Mike Vrabel yesterday after Titans practice. It's a big day coming up today for the Titans at training camp. The pads are coming on. First day of full pads today at training camp, and as Vrabel talked about there in that clip, maybe a better opportunity to start to evaluate some of the guys up front on the line of scrimmage, on the offensive line and defensive line as well. Joe Rexrode, as the pads are coming on today, what are a couple of guys that stand out to you in terms of the most intriguing guys to watch in full pads, maybe on the offensive and defensive lines as well?
Well, I think it's going to be fun to watch, the interiors go against each other, So when you get, Autry and Simmons going against, Davis, Jones, Saffold, that's good stuff. I mean, that's really good players on both sides of the offensive line, but you also know that. So to me, it's the unknown that's more interesting. And Dylan Radunz is awfully interesting. Like, I will say this, you want to hesitate, just like I want to hesitate on Racey McMath being a Pro Bowler right away, okay? Want to hesitate on, panicking or pressing the panic button anyway. But I will say that Dylan Radunz has struggled in pass pro. When they have done team, and he has been, and he has been out there, he's been moving around, like really, the tackles have been moving around a lot, but he has struggled against a variety of players. So is there anything different for him when the pads go on? Do you see him assert himself in the run game like you really can't before the pads go on? Important few days for him, I would say, because it's just at this point he needs a lot of work, I think, in pass protection. Now, is that some huge shock for a rookie? No, but again, you're talking about a second-round pick and a guy who, when you're selected there, I think the expectation is that pretty quickly you're going to, be competing to get on the field.
Right.
So he's certainly someone, to keep an eye on. I think, as Vrabel said, the tight ends, the linebackers, that's also, we've been wondering about Anthony Ferguson's blocking forever now. Well, there you go. Here's more of an opportunity to see some of that. See how, Swaim and now Swaim's been out a couple of days. Stocker's in there now, how he looks. Tommy Hudson's still competing. It's not like out of the realm of possibility that he could beat out like a Stocker for that role. It's the same kind of player. Monty Rice is interesting for sure. And on the flip side of Radunz, a guy who I think has looked impressive and has some juice, has some burst, has some moves. Rashad Weaver, certainly. A guy, I liked him as a player at Pittsburgh. He's a guy who made a lot of plays and was stout, set the edge, but also had some pass rush ability. He looks like he can help this team. And so now, does it still look that way when he puts pads on and there's just a little bit more at stake and there's a little bit, there's just more cost to these confrontations now?
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting. And you brought up Radunz. That's probably the guy that I'm most interested to see. How do you handle the full contact in pads? It's going to be a process bringing him along. We've talked about that. How quickly can he be ready to play significant snaps for this Titans team? This is going to be a big step in that process, is full contact, getting a pretty decent evaluation of exactly where he is, what he needs to work on, and how that process plays out as they move forward here. Also, I'm interested to see Jeffrey Simmons as well. We know what that's going to look like. It's not going to be, full bore out there like it would be during a game, but this is a big year for him. This is a big year for Jeffrey Simmons in terms of kind of taking that next step and being a guy that moves from, a guy that's disrupting to being a huge difference maker for this Titans defense. So interested to see what that looks like with Autry together out there as well. Landry, I know Bud Dupree's not out there yet, and we don't have the complete picture. But these battles on the line of scrimmage, it's tough to get a lot out of it when you don't have the full pads, just because that's largely what that is full contact and being able to shed blocks and learn how to do stuff like that. But I'm really interested to see what this D-line looks like. I mean, you brought up guys like Murchison, guys like Tart as well, who have looked great so far during camp and have played really well, look like they're in great shape heading into the season. I'm interested to see, for guys like those two guys specifically, what that can translate to once the full pads are on now.
No, I agree. No question. Those guys have been very good in the shorts and helmets. They've been quick off the line. They've been disruptive when they've gone team. But now everybody's got, a little bit more that they're working with. And, can you still do that? Right now, that's probably one of the areas I definitely feel was a bit of a concern, and I think less so now. Just, is there enough up front that they can actually rotate guys and keep a guy like Simmons fresh, the fourth quarter? And I do. I think those guys have really stepped up to embrace the opportunity. That, at least in terms of the shape they're in, and they look quick. They look like they know what they're doing. Simmons also certainly worth mentioning. He did the presser yesterday. Basically every day they bring a top player, a key player to the podium, and they do some other players off to the side. And Simmons was the guy at the podium yesterday, and it was striking to me. One, the kind of shape he looks like he's in, very, very good, but just also like his confidence. And it's a little bit like A.J. Brown. They're both going into their third year. He just seems like a guy who knows exactly what's going on, knows what he needs to do, is healthy at this point. And even just the way he talked at the press conference, you contrast that with a couple of years ago when he came in as a rookie. It's a pretty big difference, pretty big leap in just confidence, you can tell. And also, obviously, at that time, he was answering the questions about his trouble before he got to Mississippi State and all those things too. Sure. But you just don't know if someone's going to stay healthy. And you're not going to see much of Jeffrey Simmons in real football here before it starts. But I've seen nothing to dissuade me from thinking that he might be on the verge of a huge season.
We see Derrick Henry get in any of this when the full pads are on today? Get in, maybe lowering that head a little bit, stiff arming some folks? My guess is he's going to be standing off to the side.
Battering ram all day. It's just going to be tackle Derrick. He'll get every rep in the tackling drills. It's funny. I'm glad you brought him up because he actually had a clipboard on the sideline yesterday.
Just taking some notes.
Yeah, he may have been calling plays, during team. I mean, everybody else, like, A.J. Brown's out there and Julio Jones out there. Tannehill, Henry's over there with his clipboard, just relaxing. They're not going to mess around with that. But, on the tackling drill front, and I know the big fellas are the focus, but this is also tackling for DBs. And, at what point is Caleb Farley going to get into that? We haven't talked about him yet. I will say, just like last week, but now you can actually talk about it because he's not on a field you cannot discuss for players coming back from injury. But he looks good. I mean, he's big, he's fast. His change of direction looks really good. What about contact? When will that come? I don't know. But I would say yesterday was a pretty encouraging day for the Titans because it looks like they're going to be able to get something from their first round pick this year. Maybe that's not some big surprise, but when a guy starts out on NFI, you just don't know. And backs, you just don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm interested in, and we've not talked about him a lot so far during training camp, but I think could have a pretty big role in this offense in terms of the different ways they use him. Darrington Evans. I mean, with Henry not really participating in the team part of this, and we all understand why. It's probably a great move by Mike Vrabel. This is a pretty big opportunity for Evans to get some valuable reps, not only in the passing game, which I think you and I both feel like he can be a weapon in, but also in the running game as well, like proving that you can run in between the tackles at the NFL level. Like I think this training camp and the preseason, a big opportunity for Darrington Evans to show what he can do, because he really didn't have that chance last year. I mean, he was hurt for a lot of the year. He got some good snaps towards the end of the season last year. But with Derrick Henry doing what he does, he's going to be on the field most of the time. I'm interested in the different ways they use Evans this year. And I think this stretch here with Henry kind of just holding off to the side while team periods are going on, it's a pretty big opportunity for Darrington Evans.
No, I agree. And I think he looks really good he looks really fast. He looks explosive. He gets to the corner really quickly on some of these outside runs, and he's catching the ball. I think I would disagree a little bit with Corey Curtis from yesterday on Brian Hill. I think Brian Hill's a good signing, and he's got more size. And maybe like if Henry were to miss time, it would be very handy to have a guy like Brian Hill around. But I think we'll see. Pads will help tell the story there. Preseason games too, but I feel like Evans is, if they go with a series with someone else, I think it's going to be him. And I think he's going to have more than just the third down role. I think you want to get the ball in his hands. So far, I think it looks good. And he's had a little bit of downfield work too, which I think is makes sense. I mean, he can outrun a lot of people. So that's going to be really interesting to watch. And of course, McNichols is now active. But I mean, if you're the Titans, you want, frankly, McNichols to be beat out by these guys. He's helped them a lot. He's a solid pro, but you want more from that position. And I think Evans can provide it.
When we come back, Rexrode has a Titans training camp edition of Buy or Sell. Am I buying what Rexrode is selling? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. ESPN 94.9 is the official English radio home of the Nashville Soccer Club. Listen in tomorrow as Nashville SC takes on New England. Pregame starts at 5:45 and the match begins at 6 p.m. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, discussing the Tennessee Titans. And Joe Rexrode, you came out with a piece yesterday at theathletic.com. A little training camp edition of buy or sell for the Tennessee Titans with some things you're buying and selling so far through Titans training camp. And I read through it. Very interesting piece you've got up at theathletic.com. I hope people can check that out. You can find that tweeted out at Joe Rexrode on Twitter.
And you have no quibbles?
Oh, I've got some quibbles.
Oh, okay. Well, let me have it.
Well, let's just start with the sell part of this, because obviously we talked about it yesterday on the show. Racing McMath getting a lot of love right now. Racing McMath, not only from Titans media that's been out there to watch him play, but when A.J. Brown basically compares Racing McMath to Julio Jones and says that he reminds him of Julio, there's going to be a little bit of noise that comes with that. And as A.J. Brown kind of laughed about it, and you detailed here in the piece, everybody started writing that down when A.J. Brown said that. Look, I like the size and the speed, but I'm kind of with you on him. Let's hold off a little bit before we crown Racing McMath the next Julio Jones. I would say let's be cautious on that front. And one thing you bring up here in this piece, which I think is a very good point, what exactly is the opportunity for McMath going to look like? If Reynolds is healthy, if Julio's healthy, and A.J. Brown's healthy, there's not going to be a whole lot of reps at wide receiver for a guy like Racing McMath. Now, in your mind, and obviously there's still some games to come, we've not even gotten to the first preseason game, but at this point, as a sixth-round pick, would you say that Racing McMath is in a safe spot in terms of his ability to make this team based on what he's displayed thus far?
I don't know if I would use the word safe. Safe is tough. Safe. I think I've got four guys who are safe, and that's the big two, and Reynolds, who by the way, has been out since Thursday, and is missing all these reps, and obviously they signed him, and he's going to be a part of the plans, but that is opening opportunity. And there's different kinds of guys doing different kinds of jobs, right? But I'll tell you what, Chester Rogers yesterday, and really every day, but especially yesterday, was great. And Chester Rogers has played in this league. He's a veteran. He is a very good route runner. He catches everything. He's making a push. So, a guy like Reynolds gets hurt, a guy like Rogers comes in, and that's just a different deal. I mean, McMath is still a project to some extent. Now, if McMath is going to be a presence and do as hoped in the kicking game, then I like his chances. But safe, I don't know. I think the fourth guy I would say safe would be Des Fitzpatrick.
Sure.
Fourth-round pick. It's an investment. And honestly, I think Fitzpatrick and Nick Westbrook-Akina are guys who haven't made a ton of plays at this point. I would say, Chester Rogers, Marcus Johnson, you could argue that they've made more plays, more of an impact catching the ball than the two I just mentioned. But the two I just mentioned, I still think have a better chance of making the team. And again, with Westbrook-Akina and with McMath, you have to keep special teams in mind. Anytime that you can have a redundancy and have a guy in a position group who also is going to be a core special teams player, that's a big deal. But I think there's four that I would say safe. And then I would go Westbrook-Akina and McMath. And I just, Batson is just, it's going to be tough, but I guess I'm going to keep him. At this point, I think I might put a Rogers as a seventh guy over a Batson, because I think in a pinch, he could be the third guy out there and the Titans would feel okay with him. Like offensively, plugging a guy in, plug and play, Reynolds is hurt, whatever. I think Rodgers right now is demonstrating this veteran understanding and just an all-around, good, solid game. I think I'd have him as my 7th guy right now.
Now there's one part of
tough.
this piece. It is tough. I mean, that's a great problem for the Titans to have, because there have been some Titans teams in the past where you're looking past the number 2 guy to see, all right, is there anybody else in this team that can help you on the field at wide receiver? That should not be the case this year with this group. They should be in good hands on that front. The one part of your article that you put up in terms of the buy section that I don't know that you're wrong, I just don't know that I'm quite willing to go there yet, is the Anthony Firkser part of this, being ready to be a number 1 tight end. Again, I know that he's looked great in training camp. I just don't know that I'm quite yet willing to go that I'm absolutely buying that yet until I see it for a few weeks at the NFL level. You know what I mean? I mean, he's a guy that you know what you have in Anthony Firkser. He's sure-handed. We had some texters talk about that on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Until I see it for a stretch of time at the NFL level as a starting tight end and number 1 tight end, I don't know that I'm quite yet willing to buy that he's ready to be a number 1 tight end.
Well, that's fair. I mean, and I'm making this observation again: shorts, helmets,
Sure.
running around out there. Guy who definitely, I mean, his upper body is different. He has worked hard to be more of a, more of a factor in the run game. But yeah, it's going to get interesting with him too, and how he's used and things like that. But I tell you what, he looks awfully good. Again, with him, it's kind of like what I was talking about with Simmons, and AJ Brown. Certain point in your career, you're healthy, you're young, but you know everything. You've been around a little bit, and with him, it's just a totally different kind of opportunity now. I feel like he's done. It looks like he's done everything. And all indications, he's one of the off-season winners. He's got his nice parking spot next to Vrabel. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But
I don't know either.
He seems to just really have jumped on this opportunity. I'm certainly not saying he's going to be like a standout tight end in the NFL, but I definitely feel I'm buying right now that he's up for it. How good will he be? I don't know how much will he be used. I think that's going to be week to week. But man, you project this offense with everybody on the field, and there's some linebackers that are going to get twisted around by Firkser at times. And we know that Tannehill and Firkser have great chemistry. By the way, real quick on Firkser, Deshaun Kaiser had a terrific TD pass to him yesterday, kind of an up and down day for Pfizer. Woodside was better.
Did you say Pfizer?
Did I just say Pfizer?
Did you call him Pfizer?
Joe and his vaccines.
Oh my gosh. He's got what you need. You need a touchdown, just inject a little Pfizer.
Oh, that was awesome.
Pfizer Skiatica.
That's right.
Kaiser, sorry. And anyway, Logan Woodside has been better than him. Woodside had a TD pass to Chester Rogers on Molden. That was actually great coverage by Molden, and it was just a perfect passing catch. But, I guess he's the Moderna and Kaiser's the Pfizer. I don't know.
I guess so. Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. JC in Goodlettsville texting in. Maybe McMath's hysteria creates opportunity for a trade for a tight end or online depth, higher pick next year, etc. So maybe Racing McMath, little trade bait for somebody else?
I don't know
if I'd go that far.
I don't think there's some huge trade market. It's been a nice story, and he looks good. And certainly when he goes out in that first preseason game, this is what happens. That's when all the other GMs around the league just absolutely go through the film of all the other preseason games to look at bottom of the roster guys, and people are going to notice him. Like if he were to go on waivers and the Titans thought that they could keep him on the practice squad, they probably wouldn't be able to. But saying that he would be some kind of a trade chip right now is a little bit of a leap.
One thing that I agree wholeheartedly about in your assertion here on the buy part of it, kicker's a problem. The kicking position is a pretty big problem. I don't think you're going to find many Titans fans that dispute that at this point.
Sam frickin' Ficken better be kicking today.
That's right. See what happens on that front. When we come back, we'll be joined by Adam Sparks from the Knoxville News-Sentinel, now moving over to Knoxville, covering the Tennessee Volunteers. Vols Media Day coming up later today. We'll get his thoughts on Josh Heupel heading into year one and the strengths and weaknesses of this Tennessee team heading in to the 2021 season. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com, here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, hour number 2 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. The Vols getting some media day underway today out in Knoxville. Joe Rexrode out there as well. And to help us talk about this a little bit more and to cover Tennessee a little bit more, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our good friend Adam Sparks, now of the Knoxville News-Sentinel. Adam, what's going on, man? How we doing?
Good morning, guys. I'm slowly getting adjusted to Eastern time. I was telling Rexrode last night that I was so used to in Nashville getting that text from Knoxville or elsewhere of what the time was, and then changing that by an hour for my own notes. suddenly when I get it from Rexrode yesterday, I have to actually keep the time that he sent me for Eastern.
That's
so
right.
That's an adjustment right now, but I'm making it.
I mean, I guess technically you got a little bit more sleep than you would otherwise at that point. What's the adjustment been like going from Nashville, obviously covering Vanderbilt for the Tennessean for so long, now with this next challenge, moving to Knoxville and covering the Vols?
Well, I mean, so much of it is. I expect it. I grew up in the state, so I kind of know a good deal about the Vols and the background, the fan base, and all that. But the markets are obviously different, and that's something that my wife here has been here for a number of years, and so I remember asking her. We dated for the last 4.5 years, and I would ask her when I would come up to Knoxville about are there fans of other teams here? And yes, technically there are, but there really aren't. And that's the difference between the Nashville market and the Knoxville market, obviously, is that like when you cover Vanderbilt, there'd be obviously a ton of Tennessee fans, but there'd also be a pocket of Auburn, of Ole Miss, of a lot of Alabama in town, and so on and so forth. And Knoxville, you're kind of surprised when you see somebody in a T-shirt of another team. They're an other, so to speak. They're a counterweight because there's just so much orange around, and that's what college towns are supposed to be, and they certainly are usually in the SEC, and UT is certainly not a pretty good example of that.
So have Vanderbilt fans forgiven you yet, Sparks, for betraying them and moving east?
I got I thought, I knew this was going to happen for a while, obviously, and I thought Etu Brute was going to come out probably in the first 5 minutes, and it took it took a couple of hours till I got that one, which was surprising. Actually, I think the first comment that I got of that was actually from a Vanderbilt employee, so I got a kick out of that. No, they've been somewhat understandable. The good thing is I guess I kind of softened this or forecasted it a little bit for people because Bev, as Joe knows, my wife, which he paid for her meal last night. I don't know what kind of message he's trying to send there.
Wow.
But, yeah.
It's my wedding gift to you.
That's right. People on Twitter actually from Vandy knew Bev pretty well and knew she was in Knoxville, so I guess once you put two and two together, it wasn't going to be a terrible surprise that I ended up out here.
Well, we're excited to have you out there. Go ahead, Joe.
Sorry, the biggest Vols/Braves fan in the world. You will not find a bigger combination Vols-Braves fan in the world. I defy anyone to find that. You better come with on a daily basis, Sparks.
And I'm adjusting to that, as Joe knows, because as Joe has mentioned on the show before, I don't like sports outside of sports, outside of writing about it. I watch documentaries and I watch other stuff, and I don't really watch a lot of ball when I'm not covering it. That's just sort of the way I am. And now in this household, I am adjusting to having like Braves pregame on and Braves replay, like these old guys back in the 80s that would like record the games on a VCR tape and watch them in the off season. I get that now where I'm like, wait, I thought they won. Well, they did. I'm watching it again in the same night. So I'm dealing with that right now, but we'll get through it.
That's right. The intensity is strong there. Got to love it. Adam Sparks from the Knoxville News Sentinel on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. So, Adam, obviously Josh Heupel moving into his first year with the Vols here, taking over a program that at the time was in disarray, and there are a lot of challenges both on the field and off the field with this Tennessee team. As you kind of sift through all of it and you look at Josh Heupel moving into year one, what do you think is the most important thing for him to accomplish this year, whether that's on the field, whether it's off the field? How would you answer what the most important task is for year one for Josh Heupel?
Well, it's the same task that the last, 4 coaches at UT have had to face, which is I need you to believe in me by the end of this year. Believe in what I do, believe in my system, believe in my recruiting and all that. And, I think most of these past few coaches have gotten that after year one. But it's not easy. I mean, with Heupel, he's got to make Vol fans and players believe that his offensive system is good long term because that's what he's known for, but he's making a drastic change. Pruitt was turning this in a direction of power football and you win with defense and these sort of things, and he had recruited to that for the past couple of years. Well, now it's a hard left turn with Heupel of we're going to be more up-tempo. Now there is a misnomer there. They're going to try to run the ball with a lot of power, but it's still a little bit of different set of players that he'll be bringing in, a different system, different quarterbacks, obviously, and that's going to be kind of a hard adjustment. But by the end of the year, you have to believe that can win long-term. And within the moment, he's going to have to decide whether he's going to make a hard left turn toward that or if he's going to do it gradually, because I'm not sure if he has the roster to do it quickly. He could do it gradually, but then it comes off looking like something that he doesn't necessarily want to do. So every first-year coach, especially when they inherit a team that's not set up to run what they want to run, has to go through that, and he's going to have to do it too on both sides of the ball, whether to do it quickly or gradually. And I'm not sure if he knows which to do. The good thing is that the schedule is set up to kind of crawl into this season. I mean, Bowling Green, Pitt, Tennessee Tech. I think Pitt could be a little bit of a trap there, but you're set up to go 3-0 and then go down to Gainesville 3-0 and try to be competitive down there. And even after that, Missouri, South Carolina, Ole Miss is not exactly a murderer's row after the swamp. So could UT go 3-4 in the first 7 games? They could. They could also go 5-2 and really not be that good. So he is at least going to get a little bit of leeway to do what he wants to do.
All right, here's a question that combines the beat you're leaving and the beat you're joining. So right now, you've engaged with Clark Lee some, Josh Heupel some, and you know the very different situations they're in. Who would you guess will have more success between those two and be longer at their job?
Clark Lee probably longer at his job, and that's not a knock on Heupel. That's more of a commentary on the situation. I mean, Derek Mason was there 7 years and never had a winning season, so Clark Lee will be given more rope, so to speak. Also, he's a Nashville native, so he'll be given more leeway that way, also, and an alum. So he'll last longer probably than any of the first-year coaches in the SEC just because of that situation. I mean, again, it's relative in terms of who will have more success, because if Clark Lee goes 5-7 this year, that's a pretty optimistic look at where Vandy is headed. If Josh Heupel goes 5-7 this year, people are going to be wondering if he's the answer. So it's certainly different situations. I mean, I think they're in kind of the same spot that I think the expectations are pretty low early on. I think at this point people just want Heupel to make Tennessee competitive and respectable, and at Vanderbilt people want Clark Lee to sort of do the same. I mean, he's taken over a team that went 0 for last year and has a lot of holes on the roster. Heupel's taking over a team that underperformed last year, but also has an NCAA investigation surrounding it. So neither one of them walk into a good spot, and I think that's why there's going to be some patience around them, but also the differences in the fan bases and in the history. There's going to be less patience around Heupel because of the program that he comes into.
Adam, how important, in your opinion, in year one is it for Josh Heupel, regardless of who the quarterback is, and they've got 4 guys battling for that spot right now, to show significant progress at that position, regardless of what the win-loss total looks like? How important is that position and his ability to develop that position in terms of what his future outlook is going to be at Tennessee?
Yeah, the future outlook, it kind of depends on who it is, because Hendon Hooker is, he's technically a senior, the Virginia Tech transfer. If it's him, and he plays pretty well, you say, okay, that's good, but then you feel better about that. And, that's a dicey situation because, a lot of what you hear is that from start to finish, Hooker was slightly better in spring, but the knock on him right now is that he's a little bit inconsistent, prone to mistakes. There's some questions of turnovers and accuracy. Harrison Bailey is solid and, was in the program last year, is good with the short and intermediate throws, can't necessarily throw deep. Joe Milton is a physical guy that Big, strong guy, can run, has a cannon for an arm, but he wasn't here in the spring, so he's just now getting into the offense. Can he learn it quick enough in those early games? So each of them has a plus and minus on them. I think that tends to lean toward he's probably, if he has to, he'll play 2 quarterbacks early on and let them figure it out on Saturdays or on Thursday, I guess, because the Bowling Green, the opener is a Thursday game. But it does tell you the fact that Hendon Hooker, you see a lot of the preseason magazines, has Hooker as the starter coming out of spring, at least the front runner is the starter. But most of what I hear around Knoxville is that people saying it's going to be Bailey or Milton. That tells you that it's more of a guess of anticipation, that Hooker was the best in the spring, but what he wasn't good enough, so it's got to be one of the other 2 guys.
You think this defense has a chance, to stop decent offenses this year, Adam, just from, looking at it on paper?
Well, I mean, they could be hampered by their own offense because everybody knows by now that if up tempo is good on offense, that's great. If up tempo is bad, it's even worse than your defense because you have a lot of 3 and outs that spend about 90 seconds of clock time, and your defense is stuck out there longer. I mean, they're going to have issues, I think, especially in the front 7 or even front 6, because I think they're going to be in nickel a lot. The good thing for Tennessee, I think, is that a good amount of their talent is in the secondary, and I think they are going to be a little more in a 4-2-5 and more of a nickel look. And so what they wanted, they're going to kind of go to the strengths with that secondary, and that's fine to do in the SEC because so many people are throwing the ball right now. They can kind of work out the kinks a little bit early on with their pass rush. But until they get a pass rush and until they get some consistency and depth up front, they're going to have some issues. I think they're fine in their starting front 4, at least serviceable. I think the bigger issue is going to be depth up front, and that's going to come into play more when they get into the SEC schedule, and that's where it matters.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to it with Tennessee getting underway in fall camp coming up and college football season here before we know it. Adam, thanks so much for taking time to join us this morning. Looking forward to your coverage of the Vols this year at the Knoxville News-Sentinel, and appreciate you taking time to join us this morning.
All right, guys. Y'all have a good one.
Absolutely. You as well. Adam Sparks does a great job at the Knoxville News-Sentinel. He will crush this Vols beat out there. So looking forward to that coming up to watch this fall from Adam Sparks with the Tennessee Volunteers. When we come back, we'll react a little bit to what Adam had to say there and look ahead to year 1 for Josh Heupel and the Tennessee Volunteers. Media Day today in Knoxville. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Tune in to Nashville Sounds Baseball tonight as the Sounds are at First Horizon Park against Toledo, the AAA affiliate of the Detroit Tigers. Pre-game show with Jeff Hem starts at 6:50, and first pitch is at 7:05. Nashville Sounds Baseball on ESPN 94.9, presented by 312 Pizza Company and Farm Bureau Health Plans. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Thanks to Adam Sparks of the Knoxville News Sentinel for joining us in the last segment. Joe, I'm looking forward to seeing Adam cover the Vols this year. It's going to be interesting, a different change of pace for Sparks. I think he'll do a great job out there in Knoxville.
I don't think that there's possibly any transition or any beats that could be more different in the world than the Vanderbilt and Tennessee beats. Yeah. And they're both great in their own ways.
Yes.
But, the Tennessee beat, been around. I've been around like the Ohio State beat, the Michigan beat, the Penn State beat. I've seen a lot of the Alabama beat. I don't know that anyone can hold a candle to just the numbers in terms of covering Tennessee. Notre Dame, the same thing. I don't know that there's a more rabid, press corps than that covering the Vols. And obviously then you factor in what the last several years have been like, and it's a very interesting, situation.
Yeah.
But, and you go from, Vanderbilt, of course, it's a small beat. I would say of the Power 5 football beats out there, probably as small as any, covering it. So very different. But the thing is, the way Sparks does his job translates to any beat. He's going to find great stories and tell them to do a great job. So it's a credit to, he's been a credit to the Vanderbilt beat. He'll be a credit to the Tennessee beat. Tennessee fans, are going to, who want to follow this team or should be happy that he's here in Knoxville. And it'll be interesting. Nightly now, Bev is going to be like, okay, what's up with the third string left guard, man? What's up? Give me some details as Adam tries to watch like a documentary on the Crimean War. So It's going to be a fascinating dynamic.
It's going to be a great time. I'm sure Adam very much is looking forward to that. So, Joe, you're also out in Knoxville today for media days for Tennessee getting underway. Fall camp coming up. College football season will be here before we know it. What are you most looking forward to today with Josh Heupel? What do you think this day is going to be like for him in terms of getting things rolling here and getting started for his first year of college football season? I asked Adam about the biggest challenges that he's got heading into this job, heading into the season. What do you think now of Josh Heupel, where he sits, and maybe the opportunity that's in front of him as he sits here today heading into year one as coach of the Vols?
Well, look, I think, again, I said this earlier, I think this is going to be a very different media day from recent ones because you have a head coach who seems to value letting people in his program speak, letting people outside the program tell stories. Every single football team, just the size of football teams dictates this. Every single football team has great stories. There are great stories to be found and told. Some coaches make that difficult because they have a bunker mentality and, I don't need this crap and I'm a ball coach. And ultimately it's about winning. Of course it is. And that's what's going to keep you in your job or not keep you in your job. But Heupel seems to get the big picture here much better than his predecessor did. And I give him credit for that. I appreciate that because, look, if you're Tennessee right now, I think you need to do everything you can do to connect with fans and to make people want to follow a team. This team is not going to be great. We know this. If this team wins 6 games, I think it will be a pretty successful season, given the roster right now and the schedule. So it's important to be able to have stuff like today and actually provide an opportunity for interaction and stories to be told and people to talk and not have to freak out because, I don't want some player to give some quote. Pruitt essentially muzzled his players and his assistant coaches. Now, I would also say if Pruitt were still the coach, it'd be interesting because, name, image, likeness right now, I think is going to force a lot of coaches who have that philosophy to rethink it. Because if I'm a college athlete, I've got a brand now, and I want my story told, and I want to share it with fans. But I think Heupel, independent of that, gets it. So I give him credit, and that is honestly one of the things I've been most impressed with. I know that people are like, well, yeah, but I want to hear about recruiting. I want to hear about the offense and the quarterback development, and I get that, and we'll see. But at least, like, look, I'm probably writing something for tomorrow, and I was thinking about this, like, when's the last time Tennessee had a coach who wasn't like immediately like parody accountable? Okay, like in a like the you know what I mean? Like it's just like
Philip Fulmer.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you and I just came to the same conclusion because I went back through and I'm like, very different personalities and situations, all that. But it's just like, I mean, Heupel he just seems to be grounded. And grounded is good. Now, I don't know if it's going to lead to championships, but can Heupel, get you to a certain level of respectability? I feel a little bit better about that after the last few months. I mean, he's just like, I don't know any way to say it other than he's just like a normal guy. That's actually refreshing, okay, in this job. And I know that Lane is a heck of a coach, but
he's not a normal guy.
Yeah, think about that circus for a year, especially Lane at that stage of his life in Knoxville. My gosh, if half the stories I've heard are remotely true. So I mean, it's just like just a dude. That's not a bad thing. And again, I think he's actually so far it's been great. And I know a lot of fans are like, I don't give a crap if you guys get interviews or whatever. Like, show me the football. That's fine. But I think a lot of fans do like to connect with teams. I mean, look at like some of Rick Barnes' teams in recent years. Just great personalities. Great guys and stories. And even we still have Fulkerson out here, promoting Pal. What is he like? He's like salesman for Pals now. Yeah. He's out, which is awesome. But like, there's an example of a coach who gets it. Yeah, come talk to these people. It's better. Like, it was heartbreaking when that 2019 team, lost in Sweet 16 for Vols fans because they love Tennessee. They love, they want their sports team to do well, but also because I think they really liked those guys. It hasn't been like that in a while for Tennessee football because Pruitt thought he was Saban Jr.
Can you imagine Pruitt with NIL loss? Just describing that to people.
Well, Blake, that first down marker is brought to you by Pilot Flying J.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure he would have been just fine. Like, the D lineman is a little bit late because he's doing like a camp for kids or something. I mean, honestly, I would. Now I'm kind of regretful that he's not a college football head coach right now because it would be like you can't do that now. No. I mean, we're seeing like we talked about Ken Seals of AndySports.com podcast, but like Texas, all these guys are doing exclusive rights things with recruiting sites and stuff like that. Like, there's no more. No. My players, they'll talk once a year when I say they can. That's over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that's going to be an issue with Josh Heupel. Seems to be a little bit more open over there in Knoxville, which I'm looking forward to today. We'll see what he and the players have got to say coming up a little bit later today. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation on the Vols and look at the strengths and weaknesses on the field. What is the formula for success for Josh Heupel in year one? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5. The Game, Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. We've just tweeted out a great video at 102.5 The Game on Twitter earlier in the show. Joe Rexrode discussing the competition at backup quarterback. Deshaun Kaiser, Logan Woodside heavily involved in that. Anthony Ferkser making some nice catches as well, and referred to Deshaun Kaiser as Pfizer. That was a good moment in the history of the show, Joe. Great video, too, we've tweeted out.
Well, just another wonderful blooper on my part. Also, it's a reason Deshaun Kaiser needs to make the team, because Kaiser to Ferkser equals Pfizer. I just tweeted that out. So, I mean, think of all the vaccine signs that could accompany this.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So this was in college, NIL. You could jump all over that one.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Think of the opportunities. All these, it's like pro athletes now, like, I wish you go back to college for NIL, man. Sounds awesome.
Does sound awesome. Joe Rexrode out in Knoxville today, covering the Tennessee Volunteers and Media Day coming up. Joe, we've talked about the opportunity for Heupel in year one and what needs to take place off the field. Now, what about on the field? As you look at this team, defensively, honestly, there's not much there. I mean, you've got a couple of guys that are starting that I think you feel okay about, but the depth defensively, not all that strong, and it could be a struggle on that side of the ball. I will say, though, Joe, and I know that some Tennessee fans are going to hear this, and they're going to look at me like I've got six heads because of the way this offense looked last year. I do think that they've got some pretty good pieces offensively, especially at wide receiver. I think, if anybody else was coaching and or coordinating that offense last year, probably would have looked a little bit better. And look, I know that they've lost Eric Gray and Ty Chandler, and running back is going to be interesting to see how they kind of fill that void now with those two gone. But at wide receiver, I think they're in a pretty good spot with this group, with some of the young guys that they have. And I think this offense, at least, has the opportunity to be fun to watch. And to me, if you're a Tennessee fan, that's kind of what you're hanging your hat on this year is, all right, let's see what Heupel can do with this offense. He's an offensive guy. You do have some good skill at the skill positions. Jalen Hyatt, I think, is a really good player. Velus Jones, I think, has an opportunity to be a really good player. They've got some Callaway in there as well. They've got some young guys at wide receiver that I think you feel pretty good about if you're a Tennessee fan. So I know the offense was atrocious last year. I'm not convinced it's going to be that way this year. I think they've got an opportunity to be a pretty fun offense to watch.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, it comes down to whoever's at the controls for sure. But you do have competition there. I mean, I would expect that all those guys have done all they can here in the last few weeks to get ready for camp. And if you are good there, I agree. Hyatt is a really nice player. Velus Jones, I think you're going to see him utilized much better this year. And you have some depth too. I mean, Tillman, like you said Kelly, Ramel Keaton. I mean, you got some guys. Very interesting to me at running back. Jabari Small, is he ready to be a difference maker? Because it is a little bit of a misconception that Heupel offenses just throw it 63 times a game. Balance is important in any offense, and I think Small is a really exciting, young player. I think the offensive line could be good. One of the stories of this team right now is Dane Davis, walk-on, who looks like he's going to, former walk-on, looks like he's going to, be the starting left tackle. If he's good there, I mean, you got the Mays brothers, and I still think Darnell Wright is a very talented guy. I mean, some depth there too with Spraggins. And the offense, now Austin Pope retiring, that's tough. You hope that he could come back and really solidify tight end. You still do have Princeton Fant and Jacob Warren around. But overall, I think that's going to be a potentially good offense, and an offense that week to week in the SEC, can line up and be confident that it can score some points against most opponents. The defense is where it's just it's hard to have a ton of confidence or excitement.
Yeah, I mean, they just, from a depth perspective, there's not much there. And, in terms of pass rush, they had their moments last year, but it largely was invisible. I mean, there was not much pass rush being generated. And they've got some younger guys this year that may get some opportunities, but they just don't have much proven in that area in terms of pass rush. Linebacker, big problem this year. I mean, there's just not much experience there. I will say the secondary, if you can stay healthy in the secondary, I think you're at least confident that they can give you some meaningful snaps there and that you're not going to just be killed back there in the secondary. I think they've got some decent players in the back end. But it was kind of the same story of the Titans as well. Like, if you can't generate any pass rush, it doesn't really matter who you've got in the secondary because it's going to be hard to cover some of these players in the SEC. I mean, this honestly, it kind of feels like heading into the season, the formula for wins, especially again when you start to get into SEC play, the formula for wins is going to be you're going to have to score with people because, I don't know that it's necessarily going to be like Ole Miss was last year. Number one, I don't think Tennessee's offense is probably going to be that good, and I don't know if their defense is going to be quite that bad because it was pretty amazing to watch both of those with Ole Miss last year on that front. But that's kind of the approach on paper that I feel like this is going to have to look like for Tennessee to win. You're going to have to be able to score, and you're going to have to be able to score with pretty good regularity if you're Josh Heupel in this offense because there's just not a lot there on the other side of the ball.
Right. Now, Sparks earlier was like, Pitt, you see him being 3-0. See, there's an example of an opponent. There are a few others on the schedule where I like Tennessee to do things offensively against, again, most opponents, but you got to get some stops in those games. You got to give yourself a chance.
Yep.
There are some on the pass rush front. I mean, look, I like Tyler Barron. I like some of what he showed last year. Is he ready to take a step? Byron Young is a Georgia Military College, JUCO transfer. There's some excitement about him. Can Young and Barron combined kind of give you a little bit of a pass rush? And obviously at linebacker, Juwan Mitchell, the Texas transfer,
yep.
huge pickup for them.
They needed him badly.
They needed him. It's like,
badly.
would you like to start right now in the SEC? Because we've got the place for you. So Juwan Mitchell came in, and there's another guy. Oh, look, and I agree with you. The back end, Alontae Taylor is a nice player, and they've got some guys who have played some football. Burrell and Flowers and Jackson and McCullough. They've got guys who have played. Slaughter, got some trial by fire last year. So it's not hopeless. It's at the point of attack is where I don't know. I don't know what they'll be. You have to be better. I like Elijah Simmons as a prospect.
Yep.
I like Amari Thomas as a prospect. Are they going to take huge jumps this year? Hey, you can go through the roster and go through this guy, that guy, this guy, and there's some good recruits in there who, if they've had great off seasons, you can find that optimism, even on that side of the ball a little bit.
Let's go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Got a texter that says, how many points does UT's defense have to average per game to be okay? Well, a lot of that depends on the offense, but, at this point in the SEC, the days of holding opponents to 14, 15, 16 points a game, I think, are largely gone at this point. For Tennessee, try to keep it under 30, 35, be okay in the SEC play. That's what college football has largely become at this point.
Yeah, it's very different. The standard is very different, and obviously, you get into again, depending on opponent. Make it 40. Like, did you keep Alabama under 40?
Right.
Big win. But you go through the schedule, and I think they're probably going to be in, some shootouts. When they play, even like a Vanderbilt, which I think Vanderbilt, kind of the same thing as Tennessee. Just I think Vanderbilt could be interesting offensively. I like Vanderbilt I think Vanderbilt has a chance to score some points this year. I like the receivers. They got the running back from Temple who looks promising. Seals and Mike Wright. But defensively, I don't like Vanderbilt. Defensively, I don't like Tennessee. That game, the Missouri game, like maybe the South Carolina game, or the Ole Miss game.
Yeah.
They're going to be in some shootouts. Against kind of comparable competition. So. I don't know what the number is. You just got to score one more point than their team, but it's going to be high. You're right. It's not like that's not how the game's played anymore anyway. Nick Saban's out there winning natties, giving up like 50 points to Ole Miss or whatever the heck he did last year. So it's just a different standard right now. You got to be able to get some stops. You got to, because this offense, as Sparks pointed out, there are times when you're going to have like 3 straight 3-and-outs, and there's going to be like a total of like 39 seconds taken off the clock by your offense. And, this defense has just got to hang in there and get some stops, get some sacks. That is just a big part of it. Don't let teams run wild on you and affect quarterbacks in some way, because the secondary is decent.
One thing that I'm really interested with this team, Joe, is the offensive line. And you brought up some names. The Mays brothers and their Darnell Wright as well. I still think there are some good pieces on this line. Now, I think it became pretty obvious last year that while the offensive line was good last year, I think it was a little bit overhyped when it got to the end of the day, especially from a pass blocking perspective. There were some games where it didn't go all that well for Tennessee last year. But I think even though they've lost Trey Smith and they've lost some big names on the offensive line, both from a starting quality perspective, and I think they've got a little bit of depth there too, I still think this has a chance to be a pretty good offensive line, and we know how important that is in the SEC. If you can control the line of scrimmage, your offense is just going to be better off, and I still think that has the opportunity to be a strength for this Tennessee team this year.
No, I totally agree. Obviously, you don't want to lose a Wanye Morris.
No, you don't.
That's a tough loss. And Trey Smith leaves a gaping hole, and everybody's surprised or not that Trey Smith is about to become a very good starting offensive guard in the NFL. Nice, good job, everybody. Let the Chiefs have Trey Smith in the 4th round. Nice job.
6th round.
But I'm sorry, gosh, that's right, the freaking 6th round. Yeah. My gosh, what a!
I can't believe it.
Yeah, but no, I think Cade Mays is. He's a very talented guy, and last year was weird. You're all over the place, moving around. And like you said, just the offense in general. At some point, you're just overwhelmed by the ineptitude from the box. To me, and at quarterback, it's all tied together. So think of the Kentucky game last year, and I know that some of these guys are gone, but some are back. If that doesn't turn into a huge deficit, I swear Tennessee runs for about 280 on Kentucky that day. They did whatever they wanted to do. Now, different system now, obviously. You're not run to pass. You're pass to run now. But I think that there is some talent there to work with, no doubt. And again, this is what you need. You need stories like Dane Davis. That's what you need as a first-year coach. You need a guy who comes in, basically like an FCS recruit, walks on at Tennessee, and all of a sudden he comes in here and he's like one of the storylines of the team. Now, does that mean he's going to be able to play left tackle against SEC pass rushers? I don't know, but that's the kind of thing you need, and that he's going to be, to me, one of the most interesting, individual storylines. I think Cooper Mays probably in at center. I think that's a nice situation, right? And you got Carvin and Carone Calvert. You got, again, I mentioned Spraggins. You got a little bit of depth, not as much as you'd like, probably, but still, given just all the defections and what it just felt like, just the transfer portal just shredded this team. It's not bad, even when all the smoke clears.
We'll continue the conversation on the Vols when we come back, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Also get into the college football playoff as well. Why the holdup on 12 teams? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Going to have John Glennon from Broadway Sports join us to begin the 8 o'clock hour. We'll get into the Titans with him, so looking forward to that here in about 10 minutes or so to begin next hour. Right now, talking Vols, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Vince tweeting in, Joe Rexrode, at GoBlueVL. If I was a UT fan, I do not want Joe Milton as the starting quarterback. That has been a very popular topic from Michigan fans, a lot of Tennessee fans saying, why would we want the guy that couldn't play quarterback at Michigan? But I think the thing to keep in mind, Joe Milton hurt last year and had some ligament damage last year as well. So, look, I don't know that Joe Milton absolutely is going to be the answer for Tennessee, but I am interested to see if he gets an opportunity on the field, what that looks like when completely healthy, because there were some balls that sailed on him last year, but to your point, decision-making also an issue for Joe Milton last year, and that's got to get better. There were some decisions he made with the ball last year that, hurt or not, just not winning decisions made by Joe Milton at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I hear what Vince – that was honestly my first instinct, when they picked him up was like, boy, I just don't know based on what how he looked last year. The injury, I mean, when you're talking about your throwing hand, I mean, that is pretty significant. So we'll see. I'm not on the same boat like David Ubben and some people who think this is a lock, or I don't know if he said it's a lock, but like strongly in his favor. I get the idea of why would they go out and try to land him with all the other guys if they felt good about the other guys. But I still think it's a competition. And, Maurer seems to be number 4 in that competition. But the interesting thing will be, I think Heupel referred to this, and he'll be asked about this again today, but he referred to, sort of getting to 2 relatively quickly. So who are the 2? If we presume Milton, if it gets to 2, is it Bailey or is it Hooker? That's an interesting piece. Now, if you're thinking down the road, it probably makes more sense for it to be Bailey, but it's also got to be just based on performance. And by the way, on the media front, Tennessee did announce, I kind of referred to this vaguely earlier, but they made it official. So we are getting all 4 quarterbacks for 20 minutes to start the rotation. So Bailey, Hooker, Maurer, Milton, they're all going to be out there to be asked questions for 20 minutes. Then they go to Jabari Small, Cade Mays, Jacob Warren, Paxton Brooks. Got to get the punter in there. And
good
then
punter.
Matthew Butler, Trevon. Yeah, very good punter. Matthew Butler, Trevon Flowers, Theo Jackson. So, again, a lot of fans won't care, but I'm just going to tell you, this is a very different media day setup than Coach Pruitt had. So it's good. I mean, it's smart to do it this way. They're actually giving us some access, and should be interesting. The 4 quarterbacks all having questions fired at them at once as they sit, 6 feet apart in an end zone. That should be quite a scene.
Joe, there appears to be some hesitation on the 12-team playoff front. We've talked so much about the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams. There's been some comments made the last couple of days by leadership in college football kind of balking at that idea, and it seems to have hit an impasse at this moment. Now, it's probably still going to get figured out, and it's still going to go to a 12-team playoff. Right now, there seems to be some hesitation. What have kind of been your thoughts on that? Why do you think that it's been that way, and could the move of Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC potentially have anything to do with what we're seeing right now and maybe some hesitation on the 12-team playoff?
Well, yeah, it's one of those things where you're seeing more and more sort of, and it's really not like college football leaders coming out and saying it out loud, but you're seeing some things from different, reporters who cover the sport about how there's, at the least, it's really going to take longer to get to that than hoped. And it does, to me, feel a little bit like, it's like some people just want to, in some way, like make Greg Sankey pay for what he's done, which again, on the Sankey front, if you didn't do it, someone else probably would have, because it just looked like the writing was on the wall for Texas and Oklahoma. But still, you are the bad guy. You are the one who did it, and did it, by the way, very secretively over a long period of time. And I'm sorry, that's just going to tick people off. That's no reason to make any big decision on something like this. But, these are human beings. And, there is I think there's going to be some sentiment like, so now we're going to go to 12 and just totally benefit the SEC. Because, look, let's face it. If I'm Texas and Oklahoma, I'm doing this because I'm going to 12.
Correct.
Otherwise, I'm limiting my access to the playoff. Now, financially, you could still say, yeah, but if the Big 12 is having trouble coming close on the rights fees, then down the road, you're still going to want to get out of there. Fine. But this move, to me, is hinging on 12 happening. And you're probably right that it will anyway, and this is just people trying to make things difficult. But it's interesting. It is interesting that that there's this kind of sentiment right now. And it's going to be interesting to watch from here. Meanwhile, you got some of these. Did you see the quote from the Baylor AD?
Oh, yeah.
Yesterday?
Yeah. Did you see
for people who have it?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Okay, real quick, I'll say it. Quote, many of my colleagues around the country believe the University of Texas created this situation because they think so highly of themselves. My humble opinion, I completely disagree. I think it's because they felt too little of themselves.
Yes.
End quote. Yes, Mac Rhodes. Yes. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed, Texas.
Did you see the screenshot?
Everybody's getting their shots in.
That Max Olson tweeted out yesterday of the Senate Select Committee. Texas President Jay Hartzell is there, and Bob Bowlesby is sitting right behind him in the screenshot. And Bob Bowlesby, he's had a rough time as of late. The look on his face when Texas President Jay Hartzell is talking into the microphone is perhaps the greatest thing I've ever seen. Bob Bowlesby, disgusted.
Okay.
Just disgusted.
I have not seen this.
I'll tweet it out for you.
Oh wait, here we go. I'm going to Matt. No, I'm okay. I'm going to. Oh. Oh man, Bob Zombie not happy.
Not very happy. What a time to be Bob Bowlesby in the Big 12. When we come back, we'll be joined by John Glennon from Broadway Sports. We'll get into the Titans with him. Training camp for the Titans. Full pads coming up today for the Titans as well. All that coming up next with John. This is Robby and Rexrode, live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com, here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 3 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, talking Titans. And to help us do that, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our good friend John Glennon from Broadway Sports. John, what's going on, brother? How we doing?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're doing wonderful. Appreciate you taking time to join us today.
Great.
John, what has stood out to you so far through Titans training camp? Obviously, not a whole lot of action for Derrick Henry at this point. Today will be the first day of full pads, so a little bit of a different element being introduced today. What have been some of your impressions so far through Titans training camp?
You know, I think I've been kind of pleasantly surprised by what I've seen from the defense. You know, I think we all know that this defense has to make up some huge strides from last year. So bad in so many different ways. And granted, as you said, we haven't seen anything in pads yet, so, that's another step. But some of these DBs, after getting kind of toasted the first couple of days out there, I really feel like they've shown up. We've seen more interceptions out there. We've seen more pass breakups. I think we've seen a little bit more energy from this defense than we did last year. And, we've got guys talking about, playing with swagger on the defense and so forth. Now, you kind of got to say, all right, that's great, but we've done that, in 5 days without pads and so forth. So that remains to be seen just how much of that carries over. But it's a nice, turn to see after what we saw from this defense last year. Maybe honestly, the other thing that's kind of starting to turn, heads a little bit out there is Ryan Tannehill, and unfortunately, I'm not saying that in a great way. I think he's been a little bit off, more so certainly than we've seen in the past. More interceptions and just, missing some receivers that you kind of go, maybe if it happens once or twice, you say, okay, that's normal. But to me, anyway, I feel like, again, that we're seeing it a little bit more than we have in the past, and that's been a bit of a surprise. Maybe it's just a bit of an adjustment to Todd Downing. Maybe it's an adjustment to some new wide receivers, but we'll see if that continues.
Yeah, I think we're talking, Johnny, about Kaiser and Logan Woodside. Maybe we should be talking about Woodside and Tannehill, huh? I think it's about time to start sounding the alarm bells. I'm kidding, of course, but it has been some swashbuckling, just throwing picks all over the field so far for Tannehill. We were talking earlier. I was like, gosh, it's almost like it's a different DB every day too. Like he's, today let's get Christian Fulton a little bit of confidence. Let me be way late on this out pattern to A.J. Brown and just get this kid some confidence. But I guess on the defensive side, John, there's a lot of talk from these guys. We can see the intensity, you can hear the excitement when they make plays. Do you think there is any sort of benefit, big picture, on this defense to just do good things against this offense, even though this offense isn't complete right now?
Yeah, I certainly think, in terms of energy and in terms of the sort of the swagger that some guys have talked about, you'd certainly rather see it than not. In the bigger picture, what does that mean after 5 practice days? What we want to see is regular season. What are you going to do on third downs? What are you going to do in the red zone? Et cetera, et cetera. There are certainly some glaring holes. Pass rush last year as well. But I think where it starts probably too is confidence. This defense has a lot of confidence to build up. So when they're going out there on these days and they're getting some interceptions and they're getting some pass breakups, they're patting each other on the back. They're kind of flying around a little bit and they're saying, okay, things can change. We've got a lot of new personnel this year on defense. We've got Shane Bowen in a slightly different role, at least that he's moving around to the different practice positions and so forth. So things are different. Things are a fresh start for this defense. And I think they're appreciating that. Again, it's one thing to see that all right now. Quite a different measure, and when week 1 comes around, that's when we'll see when there's real improvement. And also, I think starting today, as you guys mentioned, the first day of pads, Now we'll see a little bit more. Are these guys holding up against the run? Can linebackers get off blocks? It's a little bit of a different story in the interior line. Does Tierre Tart look as good as he has, without pads for the first few days? So looking forward to seeing what we can come up with today as well.
John Glennon for Broadway Sports on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. John, you've covered the Titans for a long time. Can you remember a time where the Titans appear to have had this much competition at wide receiver in terms of guys that just feel like legitimate NFL options in camp? I mean, we were talking about earlier in the show today, guys like Cam Batson and Chester Rogers who have had pretty good camps so far. Like, they could find themselves on the outside looking in. What do you think of the receiving battle so far, a few days into training camp here with the Titans?
Definitely, to me, the most interesting position to watch for the Titans. I agree with you. Certainly, over the years, wide receiver has been a bit of an Achilles heel for the Titans, and for the most part, until A.J. Brown came along, they had all kinds of difficulty, picking guys. And this was not just one general manager, one staff. It just seemed like it transferred over the years from one to another, and depth, was always a concern at the position. But now you're looking at it, and you're having trouble, as you said, you're having trouble cutting this group down to 6. You're raising the possibility. I still don't think it'll happen, but it's not out of the question that, 7 wide receivers might be kept on this team. You've got your big 3, obviously, and Brown, Jones, and Josh Reynolds. You'd have to think a guy like Des Fitzpatrick, a third-round draft pick, is going to be a lock, even though he probably hasn't stood out too much so far. And then all of a sudden you've got a guy like Racing McMath coming out of nowhere. I would have assumed maybe that this is a practice squad year for a guy like Racing McMath. But what he has done so far, has really, I think, put himself right in the midst of that 53-man roster talk. You've got Joe Rexrode's favorite guy out there, old Nick Westbrook, who's a special team stud with a lot of untapped potential. And then you figure
get that shot in. That's fine. That's fine.
You've got to have a guy who returns some punts out there too. So don't you feel like either Cam Batson or Chester Rogers has to make the team too? And then the names keep going. Marcus Johnson has had a very good camp, I think, too. So yeah, it's going to be tough at wide receiver. There's some interesting decisions to make, and do you go so far as to keep 7 on the team? And you could, knowing that some of these guys are going to be special team standouts. If you had McMath and Westbrook as gunners, perhaps maybe that opens the door for 7 on the roster. I'm not sure, but it's a nice problem to have for the Titans after struggling at that position for so long.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, Westbrook and Keenan, he could probably also be a Pro Bowl pass rusher, running back, wherever you need to move him. But in all seriousness, quarterback, whatever. But seriously, like Rodgers, John, that's a guy who I've just really just counted. Like, hey, nice veteran, who comes in and gives you some good reps. But it's getting harder and harder to ignore him and the plays he's making. That's going to be fascinating. What about tight end right now? Obviously, we were there Saturday. That was a terrible scene with Briley Moore, who's now on IR, clutching that knee going down and the cart coming out. I kind of liked him as the best of the undrafted guys. Do you think Tommy Hudson still has a shot? Do you think this is going to just be like Ferkser, Swaim, Stocker, and that'll do it? Do you think that John Robinson still could potentially go find someone?
Yeah, I think you and I were in agreement on Briley Moore, much as we are on Westbrook, that Briley Moore might have made a good tight end 4 there. I thought he had some nice catches, showed some nice hands, and I thought it was going to be a nice pairing. You might have Ferkser and perhaps Moore as a pass catcher, and then you have Swaim and maybe Tommy Hudson as your blocking tight ends. Well, things have changed a little bit now that Moore goes down, and they bring in Luke Stocker. Now, I'm wondering, do they only keep the 3, Ferkser, Stocker, and Swaim? To me, that seems a little lean to me. It seems like you need another pass catching guy out there. You've got Jared Pinkney in camp. You've got Miller Forrestall. To me, those guys haven't really stood out yet. So maybe there's another guy out there that they grab. I had thought Tommy Hudson, was going to be in good shape. Maybe even as a tight end 3, as a blocking guy. He had a reputation as a very good blocker. Unfortunately, if they're picking up Stocker and you've already got Swaim there as a blocker, I don't think there's room for Tommy Hudson in that regard. So I think one other question we have to answer there, Swaim hasn't been on the practice field in a few days. He was riding the bike yesterday. How significant is that injury? Is that why they brought in Luke Stocker? We just don't know how long Swaim is going to be out. That's another interesting position to watch, though, because I would like them to have another kind of a pass-catching tight end. I'm not sure that guy is on the roster now. I liked Moore, but maybe they end up picking up another vet at some point.
All right, John, last thing for you here. Why in the world is Steven Gostkowski not here yet kicking field goals for the Titans?
I think it probably boils down to cold cash. It would be my guess. That's the only thing I can really figure is the Titans would rather not pay, what they would have to pay Gostkowski. That's why they were having McCann and Howbell out there, and that did not prove fruitful. I don't know if Sam Ficken is the answer. He had a nice year for the Jets last year, but the guy missed, he only missed 2 field goals, but he missed 3 extra points, and then that's a little bit of an issue for Sam Ficken over the years. So I don't know if he's the guy. I still think, another week, another 2 weeks, Steven Gostkowski gets that call, and they end up having to pay a little bit more for him. But, as close games as we see every year, I want to say the Titans, probably half their games last year were, 1 score or 3 points or less. You got to have a guy that you can be relied on and that can be relied on. And Gostkowski, at least for the second half of the season, was that guy last year.
John Glennon from Broadway Sports, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode, does a great job covering the Tennessee Titans. John, appreciate you taking time to join us this morning, brother.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Absolutely. John Glennon, our guest on Robby and Rexrode. We'll come back. We'll react to what John had to say there. Get your thoughts on the Titans as well on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Tomorrow, it's your chance to participate in the Nashville SC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. If you guess correctly which player scores a goal in the game tomorrow, you win a prize pack and a 4-pack of tickets to an upcoming Nashville SC home game. Participate tomorrow morning at 9:45. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Joe Rexrode out in Knoxville. He is covering Tennessee Volunteers Media Day today, so Rexrode joining us via Zoom right now. Right now, talking Titans, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Thanks to John Glennon for joining us in the last segment. And, Joe, it's interesting. Out there yesterday, Ryan Tannehill throwing more picks. Julio Jones goes down awkwardly yesterday, has to leave and go inside. Let's start with Julio Jones. You were there. You saw the play. What's the concern level right now with Julio Jones, if you're a Titans fan, based on what you saw yesterday at practice?
I wouldn't put it very high unless the concern is, is this going to keep him out more? Is he going to do less team and all that stuff than planned? Yeah, probably, because you're going to be super cautious. So everyone should be prepared for no Julio Jones today, or maybe very limited Julio Jones. You're just not going to mess around with stuff. But again, it looked to me like a tweaked ankle. Again, there was no real contact on the play. Just it was actually a beautiful Tannehill pass that he should have caught for a TD. He didn't, and then he kind of came up a little bit, kind of was crouching over, kind of trying to, work it out a little bit, went inside. I don't think it should be high, but also weird things do happen. So you always have to keep that in mind. It's hard to feel good about projecting anything on injuries in this game. But I'd expect it wouldn't be anything too big, and something to keep an eye on, of course, is Josh Reynolds.
Yep.
And how long he left Thursday and still hasn't been out there. And again, as Glennon kind of laid out there, it's not like it's any kind of threat to Reynolds, but there are reps that are being grabbed by other guys, which maybe helps other guys make the team or push for that. But also, like the chemistry thing, we talk about it with Tannehill and Julio Jones. Certainly, we know he has it with A.J. Brown. He's trying to develop it with Julio Jones, but it's important with Josh Reynolds too. And this is time that would be spent doing that. So the quicker he can get back, the better for the Titans.
As far as Tannehill goes, and John Glennon brought this up as well, maybe some more interceptions than we're used to seeing from Ryan Tannehill, maybe missing some guys that he normally hits. What have been your thoughts on Tannehill so far through training camp? Would you be concerned about it if you're a Titans fan at this point? How do you kind of grade what Tannehill has looked like so far through the first few days at training camp for the Titans?
I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I don't even know that I'd be remotely concerned about it. We've seen Tannehill, how he takes care of the ball in games that count for the Titans. And although I do think, from a coaching perspective, I think Vrabel probably is like, okay, that's enough of the picks.
Yeah.
Kind of, and you can sense that. And Tannehill, it's not like he's all happy-go-lucky after throwing a pick out there. He was ticked off yesterday after one that should have been picked off. So he's got to work some stuff out too. But I don't think it's any kind of concern level with him. He knows what you can get away with and not in an NFL game. And right now is the time to let it rip, let some guys make some plays. And if that's defensive guys at times, well, there's a team benefit to that too, potentially.
Yeah, and Christian Fulton, a big day yesterday. And what's been interesting to watch on that front is it's kind of been a different guy every day. Amani Hooker's had a good camp so far. Jack Rabbit Jenkins had a couple of picks the other day in practice. And my guy Breon Borders all over the place, all camp long so far. But good to see Christian Fulton making some plays yesterday, because we've talked about him a lot and probably not enough. He's going to be crucial to what they do this year and how good they are on defense. Like, Christian Fulton, to me, is a massively important player to this team this year.
Yeah, he really is. And, it's interesting now with Caleb Farley being activated. Elijah Molden, right now, I would say Elijah Molden is still behind Chris Jackson when you talk about slot corner.
Yep.
Of course, last year he was all over the place as a rookie. Starts his first game as a rookie. An impressive late round pick, but a tough, trial by fire type season as a rookie. He's worked hard. I would say that right now he is ahead of Elijah Molden, and I think Molden is. I think the expectation will be that he eventually overtakes him, but it's good to have that competition. With Farley, let's say he gets back out there and he's able to do contact and he's able to really compete for a role. It's interesting. I mean, to me, Farley is an outside corner. I mean, that height. I mean, I feel like that's certainly what he was brought in to be. But right now, who would he? I guess he would be competing with Fulton. I think Jackrabbit Jenkins is a lock as a starter.
Yeah.
Guy who looks good out there, fast, knows what's going on, makes plays. So it's good in terms. You want depth because we know injuries will happen, but it's also interesting if Farley were to be healthy and really be able to compete. I'm not sure he starts, until someone else either gets hurt or falters.
Let's go to our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Ron texting in, with all the talented receivers we have in camp, I know we can't keep them all and we'll lose some, but can't we keep a few guys on the practice squad for just in case of injuries and potential to make the team next year? Joe Rexrode, how do you think the Titans utilize the practice squad at wide receiver? And with the new rules in place and the roster rules largely remaining the same from a year ago, trying to sneak guys through on the practice squad, going to be interesting to see how that works, especially this year when there's actual preseason games and actual tape that other coaches can watch on some of these guys at the NFL level.
Right. Like, I would project McMath to make the team. But I think if he didn't, I'd be concerned about the Titans about putting him on waivers. Because obviously the practice squad is built from guys who pass through waivers and no one else picks them up. And McMath looks like a guy who somebody else would be like, oh, okay, we'll take a flyer on him. Now you're still talking about taking a flyer, to be on your active roster, but there's a risk with him. So, yeah, I mean, I think certainly you'll probably see some of these guys on the practice squad. I just don't know who exactly. And, I mean, we haven't even talked about, like Mason Kinsey is a guy who he's not bad. I mean, Cody Hollister is out there, and he is getting significant reps. But he's just an afterthought. You don't even talk about him in terms of making the team right now. They just suddenly have just a ton of people there. So, yeah, now someone like him, much easier to sneak onto a practice squad to me than like a McMath at this point.
Yeah, I would say so too. And, a texter earlier brought up the idea of maybe McMath with trade bait, and maybe with all the hype around him right now, maybe that could happen. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know how much trade bait there is or trade value there is with McMath there. But I will say, I mean, if you watch him play, and if he plays anything like he's played so far during training camp, that happens during the regular season, sneaking that guy through the practice squad with his size and his speed, probably going to be very difficult to accomplish if you're the Titans. Yeah, and again, at this point, I mean, I guess that's part of your consideration when you talk about the final 53. But I mean, I think he's in good shape right now to make it anyway. I mean, Mike Vrabel clearly loves the way he competes out there, and has probably been as praising of him, as anyone in terms of what he's been asked about. Plus, you see it on the practice field, and we still haven't seen pads yet. I mean, it's going to be interesting now. You put pads on that guy. What's he going to do to people in tackling drills? Yeah. And remember, McMath does both sides of the tackling drill. Right. He carries the ball, and he's tackling people because, of course, he's making this team as a core special teams guy if he makes it. So,
McMath and pads should be Mick interesting.
Yes, it should. We'll continue the conversation on the Titans when we come back. As Joe mentioned, the first day in pads coming up today in Titans training camp. What are some of the more intriguing position battles to watch in the first day of full pads? We'll get to all that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Joe, I can't believe we've made it this far into the show without wishing our very good friend a happy birthday. Happy 44th birthday to one Tom Brady today of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Brady turns 44 years old today, about to kick off yet another NFL season as quarterback, going for Super Bowl ring number 8. So, Joe, I know you wanted to wish Tom Brady a very happy 44th birthday today.
I do. That's very nice. I heard the music and I'm like, what could this possibly be? But yes, very happy birthday. 44 at age. He gets 18 hours of sleep a night and eats 3 pieces of kale. So his body is 27. So good job, Tom.
What do we think the big birthday celebration looks like from Brady? Is there any wine cooler involved that could take place tonight for Brady? What do we think? How do we think he celebrates his 44th?
Maybe a virgin wine cooler.
Maybe so.
Which I guess is that just like Hawaiian punch? I don't know, but
yes.
You can't. But sugar-free Hawaiian punch.
Sugar-free. I'm about to say it can't have too much sugar in it.
Yeah, maybe splurge and have like 1 extra ounce of grilled cod. I don't know. Does he eat any meat? I don't know.
Well, look, he played all last year.
Probably will do some he'll probably do some TikTok with him and all his like Super Bowl rings or something to celebrate.
He might do that. Hey, look, he played all last year at the age of 43 on a sprained knee. So he's healthy. He's ready to go this year. 44 is the new 25. He's going to be great this year. Tier 1 quarterback, Tom Brady.
That's right. He's moved back up to Tier 1. Congratulations, Tom. But Tannehill's moved up to Tier 2, so there you go.
Yes. We wish Tom Brady a very happy birthday here on the show today. Titans will be seeing Tom Brady in a couple weeks too, so looking forward to that too. Titans and the Bucks, joint practices, baby. Looking forward to that. Maybe the Titans get better just from practicing with Brady. The last season they practiced with Brady, got to the AFC title game.
That's a good point. And actually, I believe it wasn't Brady. Didn't Brady say something at some point like their offense is abhorrent or something like that? I think he said something, ripping on their offense. He also brought out like a participation trophy for Vrabel, so that was cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good team to have joint practices with. Really, really good team. So that's a good joint practice partner for the Titans.
Joe, the first day of pads coming up today in Titans training camp. Full pads coming on, and it's been kind of a different evaluation thus far, especially on the line of scrimmage. Offensive and defensive lines, obviously, when you're not fully padded up, you do not get the full evaluation experience with those 2 position groups specifically. What are some guys that come to mind that intrigue you the most as we move ahead to today for the first full day of pads for Titans training camp?
Well, Dylan Radunz is kind of an obvious one, but I definitely want to see more from him. Withholding too much judgment right now, I would say that as a pass blocker, he needs work. That's one thing that I would say, from shorts, but it's still that there's a lot of passing plays in the 11 on 11. And so far, I think he's got work to do there. Now, does it look different in pads? Does it look better for him in pads? Can he impose himself as a run blocker? Now that because that's not really. I mean, they still have running plays in this situation, but obviously it's still sort of like you're just going through a fast walkthrough and the back squirts through and you touch the back and he's down. I mean, now there's going to be some actual football. Does that benefit Dylan Radunz? Are these backup defensive linemen who have looked very quick and active, Laurel Murchison, Tier Tart, are they still effective in pads? If so, I think you got a really nice quartet there to rotate on the D-line with obviously Jeffrey Simmons and Danico Autry are going to be your mainstays, and you want them to get a lot of snaps, but you need them to also be able to take snaps and series off. So do those guys still look as good? And then, look, the tight end position, I'm more bullish on Ferkser based on what we've seen than John Glennon is, based on his interview on the show earlier.
Yep.
But there's going to be some opportunities for him to block. The tight ends blocking, the linebackers getting off blocks. I mean, even though the early stages of camp is more about the skill guys, still want to see these corners. How's Christian Fulton in terms of coming on as a tackler? Does Caleb Farley get into that and tackle? Elijah Molden, a lot of promise with him. A lot of great shiftiness, hips. He's quick. I think he's going to be a really crafty slot player. But how about tackling NFL players? There's a guy who, we're going to find out some more about. So it's still limited, of course, to like compared to what you're going to see on Sundays. but you have to have some work on tackling and being physical, or I think you do a disservice to your players and team on Sundays.
I would agree. Now, I would also
Quite a
say,
balance.
yeah, there's a balance there, and like to me, there was one of my buddies asked me yesterday, like, is Derrick Henry going to do anything at camp this year, or is he just kind of going through the motions and not taking any contact before training camp gets here? And I'm like, I think that guy will probably be okay taking contact once the games get here. Probably no need at this point with Derrick Henry to make him take any unnecessary hits at this point, would be my guess, the way the Titans handle that.
Yeah, I feel pretty confident that 22 is he knows the running plays, you know.
He does. Well, they had clipboard out there yesterday, so maybe coming up with some new stuff.
He was out. Well, yeah, he was out there. Looked like he was like assistant to the OC. He had the clipboard on the sideline as they were going through plays. So he's the one guy you feel pretty good, confident we'll see very little, if any, contact at all. He has been out and he's done some pass catching stuff in like individuals, and as I said, I think last week, looks good doing that, by the way. But the work is going to right now. It's going at running back. It's going to Darrington Evans. It's going to Brian Hill. Now Jeremy McNichols is activated, so he's in the mix. So you're going to see a whole bunch of, I think, especially 32 and 25. That's Evans and Hill in these preseason games, and that's an interesting situation there too. And how does Darrington Evans look between the tackles, just as a running back? I mean, he's fast. He gets to the corner really fast. He catches the ball well. I think he's an underrated part of what this offense could be. But Brian Hill's also a guy who has caught the ball well in his career. He's got some good size and maybe a little bit more of a straight-up number 2 if Henry does have to miss any time.
Joe, something that's going to be really interesting with this group throughout the preseason is trying to identify who's going to be that number 3 at outside linebacker. Obviously, you've got Harold Landry, and when Bud Dupree comes back in, he'll be healthy. But who is the next guy going to be? And you brought up a name earlier that I think is very intriguing, and that is Rashad Weaver out of Pittsburgh. And look, we know about the off-the-field issues with Rashad Weaver, and we've talked a lot about that here on the show. On the field, albeit with no pads yet to this point, what have you seen from Rashad Weaver? Does he look the part? And could you see a situation where maybe Rashad Weaver is the number 3 guy at outside linebacker and get some significant reps this year for the Titans?
I think it's possible. He's looked good. I've been impressed with Rashad Weaver. His repertoire, his quickness, he's explosive off the line. But I'll tell you who has come right in and gotten significant work is John Simon.
Yep.
I mean, John Simon has come right in and has had some serious reps, some significant reps that tell you that there's just an instant trust with him. And obviously, again, Mike Vrabel, John Simon go back to Vrabel coaching at Ohio State. So you're talking about, a lot of history there and knowledge. And Simon's been a good player. Obviously, he's on the back end of the career, but he has. I think he's moved pretty well. So, like at this point, if we're counting Dupree in the mix there with Landry, who we know is going to be on the field, a lot. I think I would say John Simon right now is your 3, and I also would say that Weaver shows promise to make you think that the days of 3 active outside linebackers on a Sunday may be over, and I think that would be good for the Titans. You also have Derek Roberson out there. Now, he had some kind of an injury as well, so it's something to keep an eye on. But I would put him 5th right now, and maybe I'm taking a little bit of a leap there, but I think that they did get a guy in Weaver who is going to be a factor, and I would think that would be able to has an opportunity here to earn some reps on the field on game days as a rookie.
Nashville SC and the New England Revolution have a huge match to take over first place in the Eastern Division this Wednesday night. Join us for a fun watch party at Boom Boss Craft Pizza and Tap House in East Nashville. You can enjoy great beer specials on Heineken, plus they will be giving away tickets to the next Nashville SC home game. Mark your calendar to watch Nashville SC take on the New England Revolution Wednesday night at 6 p.m. at Boom Boss Craft Pizza and Tap House at 1003 Russell Street in East Nashville. It's a great spot. Love me some Boom Boss Craft Pizza and Tap House in East Nashville. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion on the Titans, a little training camp edition of Buy or Sell. We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezdovic, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Talking Titans, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Joe Rexrode, you come out with a piece at theathletic.com, basically a buy or sell edition for Titans training camp so far. Some thoughts to sell, some thoughts, and some premonitions maybe to buy so far during Titans training camp. One of the things that you have talked about maybe being a buyer of in Titans training camp. A.J. Brown on his way to a new level of NFL stardom. A lot of people already love A.J. Brown. He's been very good, obviously over 1,000 yards in each of his first 2 years. It does kind of feel like he looks different so far during training camp, and that we're about to see A.J. Brown's career take off to maybe an even higher level than we've already seen through the first couple of years. When you talk about on his way to a new level of NFL stardom, what exactly do you mean? What do you think that looks like for A.J. Brown as he moves into his third year?
I mean, the hard part is knowing what it might mean statistically, because A.J. Brown could be what he looks like right now, which is certainly healthier than last year. I'd say more explosive, more confident. He's kind of at that peak. You know, you talk about in the NFL as a franchise, you want those guys who develop into great players, who are healthy, great athletes, understand the game, dominate their position, and they're not yet making big money. There you go. A.J. Brown is like the perfect NFL player for a franchise right now. I mean, he's a star. What is it? He could have a slight reduction in stats this year and still be that guy. Just it's so hard to know exactly how the ball will be distributed and what it's going to look like week to week. A.J. Brown can be exactly what he is right now and do exactly the same thing to corners week to week in the NFL, and he's still probably going to have a 3-catch, 28-yard game in there. I mean, that's just how that's the nature of the league, and it's also the nature of this particular group of skill. It's there's a lot of options for Ryan Tannehill, but I don't think there's any question about it. This is of the constant push and pull on the training camp with the football team. Somebody on one side does something well. Well, then what does that mean about the guy on the other side? Yeah, this is not like some indictment of the corners or anything on this team. A.J. Brown's going to torch a lot of people in the league this year as long as he is physically in good shape, as long as he does not sustain another injury. So, and even like yesterday, yesterday we talked earlier in the show about the pick that Tannehill threw with, Christian Fulton jumping around, but again, a very late bad decision by Tannehill. There was no chance for A.J. Brown to do anything. The next time they were down at that end in the red zone, I'm trying to remember who exactly. He turned somebody inside out to such extent that like he had about 10 yards of separation in a red zone rep. Okay,
jeez,
and scored a TD. Scored a TD in the corner of the end zone. Tannehill threw it to him, and then A.J. Brown punted it, into the air to celebrate. I mean, he's out there just doing ridiculous stuff, and he's also he's so competitive. Like when other receivers have made plays, he's out there, getting in guys' face, congratulating them. I mean, he's completely, I think, ready to be another level of player. Again, I just don't know what it looks like this year because number 2 is here and 22 is going to be there. And let's not forget TE1,
that's right,
Mr. Ferkser.
That's right. And we'll get to that a little bit more coming up here in just a second. But I do it's interesting because a lot of people have said, all right, well, A.J. Brown's not going to get as much attention as he probably should this year from a media standpoint because Julio Jones is here. I think you can look at that a couple of different ways. There's that way to look at it, and there's also maybe he gets more attention this year because Julio Jones is here, and a lot of people are going to be paying attention to this Tennessee Titans offense. I get it. Derrick Henry's there as well, and he's going to get a lot of love this year. But I think maybe some people this year who haven't seen A.J. Brown play a ton, maybe more apt to watch the Titans this year, and if he plays like he's played so far in training camp, he's going to open a lot of eyes around the NFL this year because he is a guy that when you talk about the highlight reel play, I can go on and tell you, A.J. Brown's going to make a few highlight reel plays this year.
Oh, no question. Again, think about last year while injured, what he did. While injured, while just about every game, right, at some point he would come down on the leg and just be in pain, searing pain. Then he'd go off and he'd come back 3 snaps later. Think about the play he made to win the division, from Tannehill. The carrying several Ravens into the end zone play in Baltimore. I mean, Now imagine him without any sort of limitations or any sort of pain. Pretty amazing that he did. And I honestly, I don't think that I appreciated, and probably a lot of people didn't appreciate exactly what he was going through. It's not like he's giving you detailed injury updates. You knew he was hurting, but then the fact that he has a surgery right after the season, it's like, my goodness, what would he have looked like if that wasn't a thing? Because he missed a lot of camp last year too. I mean, this was an all-year thing for him. So you're careful in this league to count on anyone to be healthy, because it's a league that easily gets you hurt. But right now, he looks pretty unstoppable.
John Glennon earlier in the show brought up the defense, how he's been pleasantly surprised by what he's seen from the defense so far through Titans training camp. We've talked about the plays that they've made, the interceptions that Ryan Tannehill has thrown, and maybe even some people saying, all right, well, maybe this means some good things for our defense this year for the Titans. Are you willing to go there yet? Have you seen enough out of the defense thus far to help convince you that maybe they're on the path to being a much better defense yet this year?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and sell that one right now. And I'm not selling it and saying there's no chance, but just it's so early. I think there are some individual positives that you can look at right now. We've talked about this, the depth. I think there's some depth guys who have come into camp looking like they realize they have an opportunity and taking advantage of it. And that's big. It's you got to have depth up front. I think in the defensive backfield, Breon Borders, look, if he has to play, he came ready to play. He's playing well. So last year he had to play at times. I think he was probably one of the better corners last year, honestly. So he's a backup. Chris Jackson, is he a backup? Either way, you have Elijah Molden, you have Chris Jackson. I think one of those two guys is going to be in the slot, would be my guess right now. And that's not a bad situation. Now you bring in Caleb Farley, and you have more depth there. I think there's some, like, again, Fulton yesterday was active, aggressive, fast. That's great. I mean, Amani Hooker has been good, has looked good. Like, he knows what's going on, and he's making plays next to Kevin Byard, who's also making plays. So, like, there's individuals who are doing good things. Again, we're talking 7-on-7. We're talking 11-on-11 in shorts and helmets. And the pads will tell us a little bit more. I'm interested, what kind of a run defense can this run defense be more reliable? That was a big disappointment. We talked so much about third down last year, but they took a big step backward in overall rush defense. And at times, that really hurt them. Can they be more consistent set? I think some of that was like Clowney at times, playing outside the system and not setting the edge when they needed him to set the edge and things like that. Can they be more sound? I mean, I think Bud Dupree is known as an all-around really good player who plays the run well. Rashad Weaver, I think, is a good – and Simon. I think those are good additions in that way. But, inside linebacker, Rashaan Evans. It's hard to have any idea about Rashaan Evans right now. He's out there. He's running around. He's made some plays. But pads on – should help sort that out a little bit. There are four inside linebackers who all can play to some level, and we're going to find out a lot more about Monty Rice here too.
Joe, the one hesitation that I've got in this buy or sell piece that you put up at The Athletic is Anthony Ferkser ready to be a number one tight end. You are a buyer in that idea that Anthony Ferkser is ready to be a number one tight end, and I'm not saying that you're necessarily wrong. I feel like I need to see more before I am willing to go that far and buy into Anthony Ferkser being ready to be a number one tight end. Now, look, he's getting a lot of endorsements. Delaney Walker loves him some Anthony Ferkser. Kevin Byard loves him some Anthony Ferkser. So I don't ignore those things. Those things carry some weight with me as well. So I think there's a lot of reason to be excited if you're a Titans fan about Anthony Ferkser based on not only what some of his teammates and former teammates have said about him, but also how he's looked so far in training camp. I just need to see it a little bit more in some games before I'm willing to buy into that.
Yeah, that's fair. Look, it's a totally different level of expectation, probably of opportunity. Certainly, even with Swaim and Stocker, I think there's some pressure off him with the signing of Stocker. But still, I mean, he has to be in line more. He has to be just on the field more, so this offense is less predictable. He has to. If you're going to do it this way at tight end, then to some extent you are saying Anthony Ferkser can be a core part of the running game too. And then defenses don't know what to expect when 86 is on the field. So that remains to be seen. I see him. He's certainly bigger. His upper body. His feet are quick. He looks as good as ever running routes and catching the ball. And last year was a breakout season for him, especially when you think about a guy who was an undrafted fullback out of Harvard. It's quite a story. Is he ready to be TE1? I'm not saying he's ready to be like a standout starting tight end in the NFL, but I definitely feel more confident that this route the Titans have taken at tight end could work out for them.
Coming up next, we'll get into the Tennessee Volunteers. Media today for Tennessee. What is the biggest challenge ahead for Josh Heupel and company as he moves into year one with the Vols? We'll get to that coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, live from the wholesaling studios, powered by RumbleOn.com, here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Final hour of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Michelle, did you feel like Joe was sincere enough in his birthday wishes for Tom Brady? I felt like you left something to be desired there.
I did not think you were, so I put out a nice tweet. Did you see it, Joe? Joe, you're
I
muted.
think he just muted himself. Only one mute issue today from Joe. That's pretty good on Zoom.
He's still muted.
So then not only was I muted, okay, so then like all my like the websites, you know, that are like that I have open,
Yeah.
were then blocking the mute button, so I couldn't get to the mute button to unmute.
You just totally
So
in no man's land.
that's how my day's going.
Yeah.
No, all right, what did you do? Did you tag me in this tweet?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I tagged you, Joe. Big 44.
Just a big day for Tom Brady. Joe Rexrode's best friend.
Oh, that's very nice. Yeah. Look at Brady. Look at the dancing skills, you know, with his rings on his finger. What a goofball. Happy birthday, buddy.
You got a buddy. Oh, whoa. They're buddies now.
That's good. That's what I was looking for earlier. Just a little bit of personal
Hey.
acknowledgement.
I've said Brady